بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الأمين أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي قال الله تعالى في القرآن المجيد وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي سيدخلون جهنم داخلين. Today, my brothers and sisters, the khutbah is going to be discussing the realities, the manifestation of du'as, and the different scenarios that are presented to us. And we find these scenarios within the stories of the Anbiya, within the Quran itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this ayat says, وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمُ ادْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ. Your Lord says, call on me and I will answer you. And those who are too proud to serve me will enter hell humiliated. My brothers and sisters, we make dua all the time. Dua is within our salah itself. When we recite Surah Fatiha itself, it's a dua. And we make dua all the time. We make dua to Allah to save us from the fire. We make dua to Allah to grant us Jannah. We make dua for our children. We make dua to Allah to expand our rizq. We make dua for our brothers and sisters who are suffering in Gaza and many other places. We make dua for them. We make dua for Allah to protect us from calamities, from hardship, from illness. We make all of these duas, my brothers, all the time. But sometimes we find that our dua goes unanswered. We have no response. The situation does not change. And we may wonder why this may be happening. And some people may think that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala maybe isn't happy with us. That this is happening, the dua is not being answered because Allah is not happy with us. But that isn't the case, my brothers and sisters. As I will demonstrate to you from the Quran itself, from the stories of the Prophet, that assumption cannot be made. But it's something that we all feel, and we do more ibadah, we go away from sin, and we come closer to Allah when our du'as are not answered. This is a good thing, to have that doubt, to strive, to keep on getting closer and closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So my brothers, in the Quran, we find many stories of the prophets making dua, and we recite these duas ourselves. We know the story of Nuh alayhi salam. Nuh alayhi salam, my brothers, he did dawah for 950 years. A long, long time of dawah within his people. And do you not think, my brothers and sisters, that within that time, he did not raise his hands and he didn't call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save his people, to save his family, to save his wife and his son? He did. But what did we find? Very few people accepted his call. And his wife and his son rejected him. They're the ones who did not go onto the boat with Nuh alayhi salam. They rejected him. They turned away. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنِّي كُلَّمَا دَعَوْتُهُمْ لِتَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ جَعَلُوا أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ وَاسْتَغْشَوْا ثِيَابَهُمْ. That whenever I invite them to be forgiven by you, what they used to do, they used to press their fingers into their ears so they can't hear, and they used to throw their shrouds around themselves and walk away in arrogance, in denial. This is what they did to Nuh alayhi salam, and he made so many dua so that his people would accept. So this is the Anbiya, my brothers. And what about Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam? He made so many du'as, my brothers and sisters. He made dua for his uncles, Abu Talib, Abu Lahab, and for all of the others who disbelieved him. But what did we find? In Surah Lahab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Tabbat yada Abi Lahab. That Abu Lahab was condemned to Jahannam. Even though that the Prophet made so many du'as for him. And did he not make dua for all of the other who disbelieved? But his dua was not answered. So my brothers, coming back to the point that we cannot make the link that Allah is displeased with us, and that's why our duas are not being accepted. It may be, but we cannot make that point for certain. We don't know. It is not a direct link between the two. And these were the prophets of Allah, and their du'as and actions have been recorded within the Quran. So we know, my brothers, sometimes our du'as will not be answered. And we will make many, many du'as, and tears will flow. We will perform tahajjud, and our du'as will not be answered. And this is the reality of this dunya, that sometimes our du'as will remain unanswered. But also, my brothers, we've got two other scenarios. A dua which is made but answered, it's answered in a delayed, it's answered later, not immediate answer. But then there's another scenario where we find that the dua is answered pretty quickly, straight away. And I give you two examples of this. Yaqub alayhi salam, when he lost Yusuf alayhi salam, his beloved son, when he lost him, he cried so much, he made so much dua that Yusuf alayhi salam would be returned safe back to him, that he lost his eyesight. The tears flowing, the sadness, the grievance within his heart meant that he lost his eyesight. He was a broken man. He just found it hard to accept, knowing what really happened, that his other sons had thrown him into the well and left him. Knowing that, he knew that, but he couldn't utter that. That must have hurt, and he lost his eyesight with so many du'as he made. But we know that the dua was answered many, many years later. So it's a delayed response. But then we find when Musa was put in a basket and floated away into the river, Musa's mother, she made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for Musa's safety and for Musa to be returned. And we find that Musa's mother and Musa alayhi salam were reunited pretty quickly. That the casket would end up in Pharaoh's house, and they would need a woman to suckle Musa alayhi salam, and Musa alayhi salam's mother was called. So the dua, my brothers, was answered. So we have that reality as well, that the reality that the duas can be answered pretty quickly as well. But also, my brothers, sometimes we get frustrated or we feel our duas are not being answered. Understanding these realities, because we sometimes think that dua is like a demand upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want this, I want that, I want to be granted this, I want more children, I want more money, I need a better job. It's like a request, more than a request, like a demand upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But my brothers, as we have seen from the prophets, the examples of the prophet, some du'as will be answered in this dunya. And we will get the result. Well, whatever we ask for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us, and maybe more than what we ask for. But also, we've got to remember that the dua that we make may be left, the answer, the reward for that, making that dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, could be left for us in the akhirah. That something far better is waiting for us in the akhirah. So we may not get nothing in this dunya for our dua, but the answer, the reward remains for us within the day of Qiyamah. When we would need everything, we would need all the rewards that we can gather. And my brothers, the reality of the dua is very powerful, my brothers. Because the dua is an indication, as an indirect indication that we rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we call upon Him. Ad-dua huwa ibadah. Dua is like an ibadah and worship. That we're calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we're attesting to the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is almighty, all powerful. And the one who has arrogance, the one who has pride, cannot humble himself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask. They feel that they are in control. They can manage their affairs. This is the one who is arrogant, whose iman is weak. If he will think or she will think like that. But the one who has iman knows that when they get up in the morning, they have this fear and also hope within their heart. They fear, they don't know what's going to happen that day. What awaits for them. And they are totally in reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But they also have hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in full control. And Allah will manage every affair according to His wish. So this is the believer. So how can the believer get up in the morning and not make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? To make all the adhkars in the morning, to secure themselves with the protection of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because the believer humbles himself. Believer has taqwa within themselves. The believer knows through dua, he seeks Allah's protection. He gets close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is a manifestation, it is a show of complete reliance upon Allah, that when we ask for something, we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one we should be calling upon. So my brothers and sisters, dua is a powerful weapon. As-silahul mu'min. It's the weapon of the believers. Because it is our direct communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is why, my brothers, it is so powerful. I've just come back from Umrah, my brothers, and to witness believers from all over the world, of all colors, languages, of all different countries, all gathered together around the house of Allah, all calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's an awe-inspiring, my brothers. Nowhere else, no other people other than us as believers perform that worship, where we call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we go around the house of Allah, it is all dua, my brothers. Dua upon dua upon dua. This is what we do as we go around the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we humble ourselves. We know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who can hear us and who will inshallah answer our call, answer our du'as. So my brothers, the dua can be answered in this dunya or the akhirah. And also, the reality of dua is that we don't know how and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer our du'as. It could be immediate, it could be delayed. We don't know the reality of the dua. As we know from the example of Yaqub alayhi salam and Yusuf alayhi salam, that his dua was delayed, and with the mother of Musa alayhi salam, her dua was answered pretty quickly. But also, my brothers, we've got to understand that dua, to be accepted, there are certain conditions as well. There are certain conditions upon us, which is placed upon us by the Quran and the Sunnah, that we must fulfill ourselves. We want change. We want a better life, but we've got to strive. We want change. We want something better. We want to increase our rizq. You cannot sit at home, not seek a job, not open a business, and seek to increase your rizq. This is not the sunnah, my brothers. You have to go and strive. We want change. We want the people, our brothers and sisters in Gaza, to be protected. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has placed a responsibility upon us to have the means to protect ourselves, to put safeguards in place so that our enemies cannot attack us, that we remain united. The unity is a responsibility upon us to perform. And one example, my brother, one story was told to me by one of my, an Arab sheikh, just to demonstrate this point of conditions. He said, a man went to a sheikh and he asked for advice. He said, I have no children. I want children. What should I do? What dua can I make that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant me a child? So the sheikh taught this man duas, and he said, look, make these duas at night and in the morning, and inshallah Allah will answer your call. So this man went away, repeated these duas every night, every morning. After several months, he came back and he said, Sheikh, nothing has happened. No child. The call has not been answered. So the Sheikh said, look, maybe you have to find another wife because your wife may not be able to bear a child. He said, Sheikh, I don't have a wife in the first place. So this is the reality, my brothers, that there are conditions which have to be met for certain things to happen, the dua to manifest itself. Without the wife, there's no child. You've got to find the means to get married. You've got to find a good wife, a good sister who you can marry. You can't just have a child. So our reality is this sometimes, my brothers, that we call upon Allah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is listening, is hearing our call. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has shown us through the Quran and the Sunnah, there are certain conditions which have been placed upon us, that we must act within our remit, within our powers that we have, to bring about the change, and we call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tie your camel and call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you don't tie your camel and you just call, the camel will stray into the desert and you will be left without water or food, and you will die in the barren desert without the camel. So this is a wake-up call for us, my brothers. The dua must be attached, must be accompanied by the actions which bring about the change we are desiring, we are asking for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring about. We must strive, we must work. And this life, my brothers, we will go through difficulties. There'll be hardship in this dunya, my brothers. Because this dunya is a place of trials and tribulations. We will be tested in this dunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ, that Allah has created insan in turmoil and hardship. Everybody, regardless whether you're a believer or a non-believer, in this dunya you will be tested, you will be tried. As one of the predecessors, he said, brothers, I've been asked to ask you to stand up and fill up the rows, fill in the spaces. Brothers are now coming in. Fill in the space at the front, my brothers and sisters upstairs as well. So my brothers and sisters, we go through life, and for the believers, we have a resting point. Because the non-believers don't have this pillar, which is dua for us, my brothers. We can rest upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can put all our hardship, our trials and tribulations, all our aches and pains that we have, we can place it with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we make dua. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you take care of my problems. You look after me. We have that means through the dua to place upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that responsibility. We have that support. The non-believers, my brothers, they will go through depression and hardship because they have nothing to fall back on. No one to call upon when they feel only themselves. And we know that we are limited. We are weak, limited, and needy. As human beings, we are weak. We need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the dua is the means which connects us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can rest upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can place all our troubles with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And rest assured that Allah will look after us. He will guide us through the best course through our life, which He feels is the best way towards Jannah. So my brothers, sometimes we are making so many dua, so much dua. Every Jummah we're making dua, every Salah we're making dua, every time we watch these videos, every time we hear the news, we know what's happening to our brothers and sisters in Gaza. But we find that the situation, my brothers, gets worse and worse and worse. So many children have been killed. Thousands of children have been killed. More have been orphaned. Many have lost their limbs. There are babies in hospitals who have no one. Whole family has been wiped out. Completely orphaned in this dunya with no one. And this breaks our heart that where are our du'as going? Where are they? What's happening? Why is Allah not responding? Why is Allah not sending His support to the believers? And I say on this, my brothers, we must be patient. We must be steadfast. We must hold tight. We must not buckle. Our iman must not be weakened by this. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may be delaying answering our call for something far better. Far better than what we are calling for. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only knows. And I give this example, my brothers, before we close off. Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was taken by his brothers and he was thrown into the well because they were jealous that their father loved Yusuf alayhi salam more than the rest. So they threw him into the well. From the well, Yusuf alayhi salam was taken as a prisoner, as a slave to Egypt. So you can see, my brothers, one disaster after another disaster. His brothers abandoned him, threw him into the well. These travelers pick him up, see a beautiful boy, and think we can get a very good price for this child if we sell him. So they took him to Egypt. They sold him into the house of the Aziz, of the ruler of Egypt. There, he was thrown into the prison for a crime he didn't commit. He was completely innocent. He tried to run away, and the Aziz's wife was trying to seduce him, and he was trying to run away, and she accused him. And he was thrown into the prison. There, my brothers, in prison. He's forgotten. He's rotting away in prison. But then, my brothers, وَدَخَلَ مَعَهُ السِّجْنِ فَتَيَانِ وَدَخَلَ مَعَهُ سِجْنِ فَتَيَانِ. Two other young men also entered the prison. And they came to Yusuf alayhi salam and they said, we saw a dream and we want you to interpret the dream. So Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted the dream for these two men. One, he said, you will be killed, you will die. The one who's on his head, the birds were pecking the bread, he said, you will die. The other who was serving the wine, he said, you will be freed and you will be a free man. The one who was freed, Yusuf alayhi salam told him that when you get freed, go to the Aziz, go to the ruler and tell him about me, that I'm still here waiting and I'm an innocent man and I'm suffering in prison. Tell him. The one who got released, the prisoner, he forgot. He left prison and he forgot. Many years went by, and then the king himself of Egypt saw a dream. And he needed someone to interpret. And this is where this man who was freed, the prisoner who was freed, was working within the palace. He said, I know a man. He's in prison. If we bring him out, he can interpret the dream. So the king asked for Yusuf alayhi salam to be brought out from prison. And Yusuf alayhi salam interpreted that there will be 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine. And he was taken out of prison, put in charge of the agriculture, of the grain store, to manage this. And my brothers, I know my time is finished because the Dr. Saab is here. The story, the end of the story is that Yusuf a.s. went from disaster upon disaster, hardship upon hardship. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had something far better waiting for him. That not only did he save himself, but he saved all of the people who would have died of famine if he wasn't put in charge. All the children that would have died, all the people that would have died because of famine, because of hardship, he saved everyone. And he also was united with his father and his brothers. This is the end of the story, my brothers. So we have to be patient. Disaster upon disaster. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, has something far better for us waiting. So my brothers, I end with this. That talking to Allah is the most valuable thing that we have. We must raise our hands, call upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at the same time, my brothers, we must work. We must do what is within our remit, within what we have been obligated to do. And we must continue to strive. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله.